and welcome to the No Assembly Required podcast, a podcast where we talk about nothing and where I mock my two other co-hosts. Speaking of which, let's begin the introductions, starting with Romina, the red-nosed reindeer, your second host, Audrey Fire and Ice Ember, and of course myself, the Dark Lord of the Internet, Roberto Blake. Welcome to the No Assembly Required podcast, filmed in front of a live YouTube audience, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Thursday evenings. Please like and subscribe.
Is this the correct layout?
Good enough.
I don't know you changed it up in the middle of his intro. What's going on here, Audrey?
Because I'm never on the left.
So you just wanted to try that out for a bit? You're taking it for a test drive? What's going on?
No, it's happened like that. So now I'm back. I'm back.
All right. Okay. So you don't want to. All right. That's fine. So how are you guys doing tonight?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing better knowing that I just got a bloody video out. So I'm like, okay, job's done.
Well, I would feel better if you had some holiday decorations. What's going on over there? You just
busy.
You're gonna get maybe just busy. I was busy too, Roberto. But I made the time. Today. I got little cotton balls and made snow for my little decorations that I'm doing in my room.
That's dedication.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have no
put these up
comment
for a
on this.
video background. You can't see them.
Oh yeah, yours is nice.
I'm
You got like a nice
decoration.
little lamp. I put it on the window.
Nice. Guys, I was filming something and my mom was helping me, and we have a puppy now. My parents got a puppy to replace my brother and I.
Aww.
And we're mid filming, and she always like pees inside, right? So she was in a diaper, which is ridiculous, but anyway.
Wow.
And halfway through, it starts smelling bad, and it's like,
oh no!
Halfway through filming, she took a dump in her diaper. It was nasty. That was terrible. Yeah, I don't know. That's how my day is going. Literally, I've had the dumbest problems pop up for this video that I'm working on. When the dog pooed in its diaper, I was like, okay, this is just getting ridiculous.
The day that dogs wear diapers,
I know.
I never thought I'd live to see the day.
I've never seen that before either until now.
I've never seen a dog wearing diapers.
It's ridiculous.
I mean, I would understand it if there's some kind of like inconsistency, like if they have some kind of like a UTI or something like that, then I'd understand it. But like,
I mean, my mom was just getting sick of it, She was like, I'm done.
If she's just like a little puppy, well, you just gotta train her.
I mean, yeah, she's trying, but it just doesn't. It's a little stubborn. So,
Are we going to talk about the thing?
I think my dog's bladder problem.
I mean, are we just going to talk about poop all night, or
Roberto, you've got some audacity to come in here 10 minutes late and then tell us what we should be talking
7 minutes
about.
late. How dare you? 7 minutes late. How dare you?
All right. Let's actually talk about something else here. So we're talking about dogs that can't be trained, but what about humans? Let's talk about role models here for a second, because that is something that we said we were going to talk about last week, and I'm not really sure why. Well, I'm sure I know why, but I don't remember why. I know Audrey got really excited about the prospect of talking about role models.
I think it's because I talked about the fact that I don't believe in role models, but I expressed that I think Mr. Beast and Marquez MKBHD do a really good job of setting a good example for the generation that's coming after them, unlike some people. So
I see.
Wait, Wait, should we talk about what is a role model first, so we don't?
Oh, okay. Yeah. I like that. Let's define so that
Otherwise we're
everybody's
gonna
on
get
the same
confused.
page.
You can start that out for me, because like I said, I don't really believe that people should have role models.
That's why we gotta define what it is.
Okay, Audrey, you define it. Seems like you have one in your back pocket. Let's go.
A role model is someone who, I wouldn't say you want to, like, I guess for me it could be used as like a good example that you can look to for whether it's like personality
or
career,
a bad example,
whatever. Yeah, or a bad example. And I think I don't think it's only a thing when you're younger, but I feel like you find role models when you're younger and they tend to like carry over as you get older. No?
Well, like if you break down the word model, like you're modeling the behavior of this person. You've cast them in a leading role in terms of whose behavior you're going to pattern and model yourself after and emulate.
Yeah.
And I think deciding that you're going to pick somebody and emulate their behavior, or rather, if you're going to pick somebody that you don't even really know personally, somebody that you don't have an actual relationship with, someone that you have a one-way relationship with, that you projected all of your expectations and all of your beliefs onto, and then decide to copy and mimic with no context.
I don't think it's like copy.
I
think it's rather, more like inspiration.
Or become emotionally invested, and even if you don't copy them, because some people do. Like literally, a lot of young children mimic the Paul brothers, and they say they look up to them, and they say they want to be. Think about it, Romina. You and I were at a panel at Dragon Con maybe 2 years ago, and I had to be very tactful, but I was like mortified because this kid, and he was so earnest, like he said he wants to be Logan Paul.
Right. Yeah, I remember
therapy.
Do you remember what my response and
that would just be.
Do you remember what my
Audrey just like knocking it down real quick.
Pre-Japan,
like leans into the mic and says therapy.
And this was right before. This was like in Dragon Con was like in September, so like a few months later, Japan happened.
Right.
God.
Do you remember what my reaction and my response to the young man was?
No. What about Jake?
Are you gonna reiterate it?
Well, all right. So largely, the long and short of it is, I told him that he should be himself instead of Logan Paul, and I also got him to admit that it's like, you don't want to be Logan Paul. You want what you think Logan Paul has. You want what you think Logan Paul represents. Because I asked him why. I challenged him, and I did as a teaching moment, but I was very gentle. And the reality is, he said that, he wanted to have nice things. He wanted to be able to travel, wanted to do whatever he wanted. I'm like, you don't have to become Logan Paul or do anything Logan Paul does to achieve that. And I pointed out that you, Romina, have traveled the whole world. You've probably traveled more than Logan Paul. And you certainly are like balling with Jake and Logan Paul's alleged money. The IRS might be interested in that. Like with the money that they would seem to have, or the McMansion or the things, and yet the reality is the production values of their videos aren't really that much higher than yours or mine. So like they're certainly not mine as far as I like when I look at it. Like so, they ain't on that Sony life, I don't think. But you get what I'm saying? It's like there's like, okay, a lot of people are casting YouTubers as their role models or their inspiration or aspirations, but the reality is they just want the lifestyle because, like I said last week, YouTube has evolved into rich people doing rich people things, and you have these kids and these young people and even some adults that are looking at this and they want that lifestyle in a very vapid way, and they think doing the things that these people do is the answer to that, and they just haven't thought it through.
Who are some of, well, I don't know if Roberto can talk to this since, I don't know. But Romina, do you have any role models besides like maybe family or something? Like someone that you don't know?
Yeah, Hillary Duff.
I don't know who that is.
What? Audrey.
I recognize the name. Hold on. Oh, I'm looking it up.
Audrey. What?
Hillary.
Lizzie McGuire?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, my God.
Okay,
what even are you? Lizzie McGuire is my role model.
You sure?
Did you say, are you sure? You're questioning?
I don't know anything. Okay, so why? Why, Romina?
You're questioning?
Why?
Lizzie McGuire was a great role. All right, Lizzie McGuire was a great role model because she was average. She was average. It wasn't like, so here's the thing. If you look at like television in the past, maybe like 10, 15 years, there's a lot of, for kids, there's this expectation of the kids doing extraordinary things. So you have Hannah Montana. She has a double life as an international pop star, which is unrealistic. You got Sonny with a Chance. You've got what is it? Wizards of Waverly
Selena
Place.
Gomez, Wizards of Waverly Place. I was about to say, yeah.
Again, kids who are exceptional. They're not really super attainable things for the everyday child. And there's not a lot of family that's involved. The stories really revolve around these kids doing these exceptional things by themselves. Wizards of Waverly Place kind of has a family thing to it, just because they have, the full family and they're all wizards. They're all kind of exceptional, but it's still very much centered on the kids doing these things by themselves. Lizzie McGuire, on the other hand, followed just a very average girl going to school, having to deal with everyday things and dealing with it in a way that was, she didn't need to have a superpower in order to accomplish these things.
It was accessible, but it was also reasonable. And what Lizzie McGuire did was what a reasonable and typical response from a young person could and would be. And I feel that was true for a lot of the content produced in that era. But I think even now with vlogs and these things, again, it's a lot of these YouTubers from a lifestyle standpoint, even people who try to, or the audience considers them super relatable, but also not really. You cannot, like a lot of YouTubers, and we know this, and I'm not shading anyone, but it's like a lot of them will literally kind of pretend to be less affluent than they are so that the audience can feel connected to them and not feel disconnected and not feel alienated. So they will you and I, we all, actually the three of us, we actually know people who do this. They'll conceal their wealth on purpose. I'm not saying you have to expose your wealth, but I'm saying it's like what is projected and portrayed on YouTube is becoming closer and closer to a contrived reality, just like reality television is, or even scripted television is. Whereas originally YouTubers were related to OG YouTubers like the Vlog Brothers, like when Zoella started, even when Pewds started, so on and so forth. It really was people who were everyday people becoming content creators, but over a period of time, as they become successful, it becomes celebrity, and it does become very rich people doing things that their audience in many cases can't, but then sometimes occasionally doing things that look like their audience can, or even feeding into the idea that their audience can. I mean, but again, it's somewhat contrived, and I'm not hating on that. I'm just pointing out, I'm pointing this out because it's something even I'm confused a little bit about is, there's this, I think it's why everyone under 18 or everyone under 25, frankly, wants to be a YouTuber now, is because weirdly they've been made to believe that they can have what the top tier creators that they love to watch have. But the people who are actively YouTubers, who are doing it, and maybe even making a living from YouTube, do not have the same lifestyle and standards as those top tier creators. But as for the people who are aspiring, can still do things that those aspiring YouTubers can't yet do, but they could be closer to doing those things, whether they start YouTube or not, in very practical ways. Because remember, what I've always talked about is the fact that if you want certain things from the YouTuber lifestyle and the money that would take, there are faster, easier ways to make that money than doing YouTube, because YouTube is actually really slow to make any damn money.
Right.
But you could be and wear, and Disney made a point to where if you want the clothing and the lifestyle of like a Lizzie McGuire or even a That's So Raven, you can actually in a reasonable middle class or even, you know, slightly lower middle class like arena, you can have those things, and you can have that and things like that.
Right. I mean, you just have to wear clothes that doesn't match.
Nyak.
Wow.
But on the topic of defining role models, I guess since I haven't really defined a role model, to me, I feel like it kind of goes in line with what we're talking about now, which is a role model is someone who performs certain acts that are accessible and attainable, but that are just enough out of reach that it's that it creates a goal and an incentive to improve yourself and to like, for example, to me, I would see
it has to be attainable enough to be aspirational.
Right. So it would be someone who's in my neighborhood who maybe volunteers a lot or has, you know, traveled and done some volunteer work. And then that's kind of like a role model. And it doesn't necessarily have to be like humanitarian stuff, but that's just like something that's attainable, but it's also something that's a little bit out of reach, because you have to go out of your way to go and volunteer and do those things.
Even my worst bosses, I would argue, kind of were somewhat of that for me, or inspired me, because I decided to follow some of their footsteps, not all the things I disliked about them, but I used them as a measuring stick, and I used them kind of as a goalpost in a way to inspire and motivate me to say, well, what would I have to do differently to be in their position versus an employee? What would I have to do to own my own business? What would I have to do to separate myself from the other people here in like the sales pit or sitting in the cubicle and take their place?
Is that a role model or a deterrent?
It can be both, because the thing is, someone could be a role model and could be neither. They could be neither good nor bad. It depends on it depends on how far you take it. Because the problem I have is this: one, a lot of people don't set out to be role models. That's projection. People, again, like I said, my issue is that people, in a one-sided parasocial relationship, put their expectations, their judgment, their assumptions, that's who you should be like, or that's a good person. And then they get mad, like in cancel culture, where it's like, oh, that person is problematic now, or disappointed, or I can't believe I used to like them, or whatever. It's like all the things you liked about them, just because they did one bad thing, or even the most horrible thing, or whatever it is, all those things you liked about them were still true. And so psychologically, I have a problem with the fact that when you decide you can't separate the art from the artist, for example, that you're invalidating your own feelings. You're lying to yourself, because you know damn well you still like that person's music or that person's movies or the role or the character that person played on television. You know damn well that none of that actually changed for you. What changed for you is that you now understand that it's not socially acceptable to quote unquote like that person, or you dislike that one thing, and you may have arbitrarily drawn a line in the sand, or maybe it is appropriate to draw that line. I'm not saying that there aren't egregious, unforgivable things out there, but I'm saying it's very interesting what people decide that is, and how they refuse to reconcile that it's valid for them. And by the way, if you're listening, that you have my permission to still, whether you're going to publicly acknowledge it or not, it's okay for you to still think that a bad person did good things and that you still enjoy the good things that they did. And you probably will feel that way about someone in your life that you love at some point and everything like that. I mean, you know that there are people that are like friends or family members of mine that have legit gone to jail. I still love those people. Those people are actually criminals. Those people are actual criminals. They're felons. They literally are criminals. They're lawbreakers. Some of them are even reprobates. And guess what?
Yeah.
Still send them a Christmas card. Still gonna see them at the family reunion. You know, like that's how it is. And the thing is, if you can't forgive people for like saying the wrong thing or a thought crime, like I don't know what kind of world you expect to live in when we have people that are going to at some point maybe break the law and go to jail, and then we're going to advocate for criminal justice. But that's a whole other thing. My roundabout point on that rant, is that you can parse and you can look at something like I did, where it's like, I don't like the way my boss treated me. That's motivation to be a better boss and be a different kind of boss. But I could, instead of just saying, oh, I'll never be like that person at all, I can say, here are the good qualities in that person. Here's the hustle and determination they use to build a business. Here is how they realized that they couldn't do everything themselves, and they actually were smart enough. They might be dumb at some other stuff. They might be very bad at emotional intelligence, but wow, they were smart enough to delegate. They were smart enough to outsource. They were smart enough to say, they're not going to be in charge of the thing that they're bad at. Maybe I should learn from that. And so you can do that. You can do that with your parents. I love my parents, but there are a lot of things that I'm like, wow, that was a mistake. That was a mistake. That was a mistake. Wow, these people are mere mortals. They're not gods. Like, so maybe I learned the good things and the good traits and the things that they passed on to me. And maybe I acknowledge that there are some things that I learned or they passed on to me that were bad habits. And maybe I try to deal with those things. Maybe I go to therapy. Maybe I don't emulate those things. Or when I catch myself, I say, that's bad. That's not healthy or something. And so I think that the problem I have is this projection and this putting people on a pedestal. Putting people on a pedestal is wrong. It's unfair to them. And it also ultimately makes you more cynical than you need to be if you just accepted their imperfections and took the good with the bad, like warts and all, and acknowledge that you don't have to love every aspect or like every aspect of someone or like every thought that they have. You can disagree with someone on 5 things and not throw out the other 95, Tell like 2020 and everyone in 2020 clearly didn't get that memo. So, I mean, that's what I'm saying is like, I think like, look, I don't love Jake or Logan Paul, for example, but you know what I do? I admire a lot of their hustle. I admire their athleticism, their work ethic. I admire Logan's personal growth and acknowledgement of his mistakes. And I also feel sorry for Jake in a lot of ways, because I think that the way he grew up, like there's a lot there that's hurt and a lot acting out and a lot of living in your brother's shadow. I know people like that. So, I mean, I can understand. So the thing is, I don't think you have to write people off completely. There are good reasons too, by the way. And so if you do write people off completely, I'm not judging you so much for that. If there is a line in the sand you have. Audrey, I think you and I talked about that before, but I mean, that's what I'm saying. I just think what we need more of looking to ourselves instead of looking to other people.
I am now showing you one of the reviews that we got because I thought it was pretty good. Hey, Audrey, do you want to read it?
Sure. This is by Unbox Warehouse. Dropping knowledge on navigating the crazy world of social media. Views. Oh, I thought it said if you use the social media. It doesn't. If you use social media or create content, you'll want to subscribe to this podcast. More information than you can shake a stick at on every episode. What? The knowledge runs deep with these 3 creators. You'll defiantly get value out of the show. I've implemented the stuff I've learned listening to this podcast, and now I am really growing on YouTube. Dang. That was a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Thanks for the review.
Positive review.
Yeah, that was really good.
I'm ready for the day we get our first hate review. That will be a funny read.
Wow. Well,
hopefully.
I'll let you read that.
I was like, I don't think so.
If you guys want to be the first one to leave us a bad review. Oh, okay, all right.
It has to be a bad review,
on the bad review. But you can leave us a 5-star review and tell us about how awesome we are on any place that lets you leave a review for your favorite podcast. We appreciate it, and we're going to feature you guys. I do want to continue talking about what Roberto was kind of saying. I feel like I talked about the volunteer stuff earlier on, and that's kind of seems like you have to be some kind of Mother Teresa to be a role model, but you don't. And there's certain aspects of it, of people and characteristics that you can model after. So you can like someone and follow someone and use them as a role model for their career, or maybe because of how they run their household. I mean, it can literally be as simple as that, where one of your friends who runs their household really well, and you appreciate that, and that's your role model in that aspect. But they don't have to be a role model for anything else, I mean, more than anything, it's kind of just inspiration, right? It's the inspiration that you get from these individuals. And just to kind of back off of the title here, which is, do bad role models exist? What do you guys feel about that in particular? I mean, I know we've kind of talked a little bit about that, but
Jake Paul. No, I mean,
but couldn't you say that you admire some of the things that Jake Paul has done?
Yeah.
Maybe not admire, it's a strong word, but
I feel like there's a difference between role model and admiring certain things that they do.
People conflate that often, but here's the thing. All right, so like, let's say if somebody was going to, let's use the role model example. Let's say someone was going to model Jake Paul. Could they model all of the positive aspects of his career and just choose to not necessarily model or emulate the things that don't match up with their own values? Could someone literally just make a framework out of the way that Jake Paul grew his career without the bad behavior?
That's an important question to ask, because his career is built off of that.
Not necessarily if you strip it down, because all right, so what would that look like? Let's break it down. Jake Paul's
But isn't most of his stuff built?
Let's rewind to his early career. His early career was very non-controversial. So his early career was on Vine, and it was short form, high energy, entertainment, athleticism, pranks that were very much innocent, and it was just a very hyperactive personality, loud, flashy, and he was athletic, so he could do things that most other people couldn't. Can somebody replicate that today on TikTok?
Probably. I mean, it's definitely happening already.
So, okay, he moves to YouTube. With moving to YouTube, he started doing according to him, lightly scripted, aka just saying contrived vlogs combined with pranks in a lifestyle format when he moved to California. And when he moved to California, he really didn't really have as much money as people might think, because he had really good money for his age, enough to move out. But you did that, Audrey. You don't need a lot of money necessarily to do that. You just need enough. And he also collabed with other people. You're in a creator house. It may not be branded as a creator house, but it's a house that a lot of creators live in. But in his case, they took it to that next step. Couldn't somebody get a bunch of roommates, move out west or wherever they want to go? Because Vegas is actually looking really good.
I mean, that's basically all those TikTok kids.
Okay, so you can replicate that part of Jake Paul's career. And you can do lightly scripted vlogs, and you can move your massive audience from a short form platform to a larger form platform if they're devoted enough, right? Have we seen other people do that, like the D'Amelio sisters?
Right.
So it seems to me that could you not, as a young person, decide to be the head and owner of a content house? Because it seems to be other people besides Jake Paul have done that.
So what you're saying is that his framework could be something that could inspire someone and have him as a role model.
If they had the self-awareness and maturity and thoughtfulness to not decide to 100%, if they decided to look at separating aspects of his character that don't match their value system or an appropriate value system, or that doesn't yield consequences someone shouldn't want to have to deal with, if they could figure that part out and then they could take the rest, then I think they could be massively successful. because it's not like we haven't seen that there are positive creators who have longevity and more relevancy, but we've seen people like, say, of the era of Jake Paul, Leafy, Rice Gum, we've seen that longevity and relevance and the controversy, it doesn't work forever and it doesn't work indefinitely, and it's not necessarily a sustainable model, and there are consequences.
Yeah, I think for me where that's I mean, I get how you can take like certain aspects of someone's life or whatever career and be inspired by that, but I guess my definition of role model is colliding with that a little bit, because that to me seems more like inspired by, or you know.
So what is a role model to you? Like, I think we're still skirting that.
I don't know. I feel like the definition's gonna get a little muddy here.
I think that's the problem. I think maybe it's the problem with younger people. I mean, me and Romina are in the over 30 club, and the thing is, like, for example, your first role models are your parents. So the thing is, with me, for example, my parents got separated when I was like, my dad moved out and my parents separated when I was 10. In fact, it actually started my 10th birthday. I mean, the chaos started before my 10th birthday, but it really blew up. It was a really big deal. I will never forget my 10th birthday. Anyway, so that's fun. But the thing about that is, and granted, yeah, I was an intelligent kid, but I started to kind of at a certain age see the paint chipping on whatever would represent a perfect image of one's parents. I saw that earlier than most kids would, probably. So when you look up to your parents and they're your initial first role models, if you're, depending on how your relationship is with them, if you can start to see the flaws in their character or their weaknesses, or that it may not be ideal to be a carbon copy of them, then you start realizing that you can't apply that like to anybody and everybody, that you can't sit there and you can't base who you're going to be really off of, not entirely or not even a large part of it, off of other people. Now, you might borrow aspects of it from other people that you look up to and admire and everything like that. My favorite uncle, I got into art and into anime and into hats largely because of him. I got into a lot of things because of him, but I also very early on started to see things in his life that were like, oh, I don't necessarily want that for myself, or wow, I don't think he even wants that for himself. And you see that with everybody, if you're looking for it. But I think that a lot of people maybe don't want to own that they're not as strong at critical thinking as they might want to believe, or they might want to beat their chest about. And that's a hard thing to own. But if you really look at it, too many people are looking to be led. I think that part of the downside of the rise of influencer culture is that literally it just shows you how many people are looking to follow somebody, and how many people are looking to fill a gap in their life and fill that hole with a stranger that they can build up fantasies about.
Yeah. Not only influencer culture, but a lot of things. Well, I think just the internet, the kind of the ability to connect and
the parasocial relationship thing.
I think that's just made it a little bit more clearer. I don't know if necessarily it means that there's more of it. I think it might just be that
I think it is more of it.
I think it's kind of inevitable now.
I think we can see the data now. I think that's what it is.
It creates more access. Think about it. In the pre-internet, you're stuck with your small town if you're in a small town. You know what I'm saying?
Sure. Yeah, but you're still wanting to be led.
But the thing is, you may not even have options in terms of that. If you're limited by, think about it. If that doesn't turn into anything if there are not leaders, or if there are not strong personalities, or anyone with charisma, or if there's a limited pool of that, or if that literally ends up just being the people in your household because of your
but I'm thinking more on like a bigger scale. Like if we're thinking about just how society is run in general, I think most people do want to be led, or even like just they just don't, maybe they don't want to, but do because they
they can't help it because, again, their conditioning has made them vulnerable to that because they aren't independent. Like, everyone wants to believe they're an independent thinker, but ask them for an independent thought. Ask them for a conclusion that they came to based on life experience versus being influenced or informed by somebody else. Something that is based on their own lived experience. Like, people don't form opinions, Romina, based on their lived experiences, the way that, say, like, the three of us, I think, and I'm not just tooting our horns, but it's like, we've had these conversations. When we have conversations, we're less likely to quote somebody than to talk about something we lived through. And that's a big difference in how we come to our conclusions about things. And then if you talk to people, everyday people, it's not it's like a freaking countdown until you're really hearing them regurgitate a talking point they heard, or where they're just doing something or going through the motions, or where it's very clear that, oh, this is the thing that their parents passed on to them, or this is the thing that they got from this very sheltered or this environment or this very homogenous thing. You see what I'm saying? Or this media source. It's very clear that people don't have self-directed thoughts.
I mean, like, for me personally, I feel like when I started watching YouTube and stuff is when I started having more role models, like, without even really realizing it. And that's why I kind of think now, like you were saying earlier, Romina, about the, or I don't know who's saying that, but how it's kind of inevitable because you're going to constantly be looking to someone or something as an example.
Right.
And I remember when I was in middle school and high school, I'd constantly check on, like, who my brother was watching because I knew that it was influencing him and influencing, like, you know, he would say stuff sometimes. I'm like, where'd you hear that? And he'd be like, so-and-so said it in a video. Like, this would happen all the time. So I think especially with, like, I mean, same thing probably happened with, like, pre-YouTube and stuff. Kids just kind of regurgitate what they watch. And, you know, some of my biggest, like, role models are YouTubers.
To a point. Well, to a point, because in the pre-YouTube and in the pre-internet age, and Romina, you and I can attest to this, you had a lot less time of being influenced by other people because you were living your life and living experiences and doing things. I'm not even joking, because there wasn't like, when we were kids, there was a limited amount of cable television channels, whereas there's an unlimited amount of YouTube channels. And the thing is, children's
and a limited amount of time on the internet.
And but I'm even talking before the internet, like in the 90s, in the early 90s, and in the 80s, when you and I grew up, there was a limited time for children's programming. So you didn't have, even if you wanted to, there was no way to really watch unlimited television unless you watched adult television, which really you weren't encouraged to do, nor was it for most children that entertaining, or did they really want to. And and so you
more time was spent. I think there was more critical thinking that was involved because you had to spend more time with yourself and with the people around you. So there was a lot more social interaction. But when there weren't other people involved, it was, as you said, Roberto, doing.
Because there was no consumption media.
Right, because it was more action, less consumption.
And your parents back then used to limit your TV time. So there was that aspect. Not to mention, there was a culture back then of playing with toys, which means that given the option between playing, to be real, like children generally, at least they used to be, very much geared toward physical activity, and there's an abundance of energy and stamina when you're young. And therefore, playing with toys, playing sports, riding bikes, and also the social interaction of being with friends was much more appealing than the isolation of consuming any type of media or content, even playing video games. If it's a choice between playing video games by yourself or riding bikes with your friends, it's riding bikes with your friends. If it's a difference between going and playing in the park and building sandcastles with your friends or playing duck hunt by yourself, it's playing and building sandcastles. It
was also a lot harder to, even with video games, it was harder to play with other people unless you were in the same room with them. It was very much like there was still that physical interaction of you had to go over to somebody's house and play with them in order to play the video game.
I feel like that happened. That was for me up until like middle school, and that's when people started using YouTube and stuff, and not even social media yet, but like YouTube. So I didn't have the completely like consumed childhood of like YouTube and stuff. That was
sure. You just didn't have the extended version of it that me and Romina had because the option didn't exist for us.
Yeah. It was more so like even when the internet did come, it was limited time. Like there was only a certain number of hours, and if you were on, like it was through the telephone line, so you couldn't just be interrupted.
So there was always when it's interrupted, I'm not gonna like. And once you got kicked off, you just weren't really that excited about waiting and getting back.
Right,
on.
You're just like,
You're like,
you're already doing something else, right?
And also back then, because people didn't have more than one computer, usually you were limited by the fact that the family was sharing the computer, so you had to only use your allotted time.
Mm-hmm.
Because everyone had to have a turn, because everyone couldn't afford to have their own computer back then. So it created a situation where, and back then, again, if you had a role model, aside from maybe a TV personality, which you know is not even a role model, you really, because again, you know that that's a fantasy. You know that that's not who that is. You know, you know that it's a fictional character. Whereas with YouTube, it might be, but there's the maybe or the presumption, or it's again like, oh, kind of. And that's the danger with that kind of thing, or with social media, is people get so angry when they feel like the mask slips or someone's not who they thought they were or whatever. But YouTube is television. You should have the presumption that it's not about someone being fake. It's just you don't effing know them, and you should accept that, and you should understand you don't know them. So any assumptions and any disappointment is your own damn fault, because you projected and invested all of your emotional equity in a damn stranger you never ate a meal with.
Who's only showing you what they want to show you.
Which is also fair, by the way, and that's not them being fake. And that's like, because they're entitled to do that, because also, again, YouTube is performative in nature. If you're assuming that what you're seeing on a screen at any given time is 100% real, and you're not opening it to not with absolute cynicism and skepticism, but with a grain of salt, with the like, if you're not just like to some extent saying, I should probably not be so invested in this, then you're not taking a responsibility. And that's one of the problems I have with cancel culture, is because it puts the it abdicates responsibility. It abdicates responsibility for the fact that you shouldn't be emotionally invested in this past a certain point. And I also have a problem with, because if you're going to sit there, I literally blame and hold accountable, or rather I feel we should hold accountable. Like, look, I was telling a friend of mine, like somebody that like I'm really close with, and I'm like, here's my problem. My problem is when you take 10 or 15 minutes to go in and go back and forth with somebody on the internet, how are you justifying taking that same 15 minutes from your kid? And then they want to tell me that's not fair. And I'm like, you know what? Your kid probably doesn't think that's fair. They're probably wondering why that stranger on the internet gets more attention from you in that moment than them. And I was like, I'm sorry, I love you, and I know you're very passionate about the things that you're passionate about, but it's like, you are wrong. I'm like, you are wrong. That is 15 minutes that you deprived from your family because you're emotionally invested in a damn stranger. And like, you can't rationalize it, and you can't justify it.
Yeah. What Chef in the chat says, my grandma used to say, people are people. You get disappointed because you thought they were different than who they actually are.
And I'd say, yeah, and that's your fault.
Yeah, it's kind of, obviously when you're consuming stuff, you have to take everything with a grain of salt, and that applies to online and offline, but particularly when you are dealing with strangers, and it you really have to practice this critical thinking and be able to rationalize for yourself that the person you are watching, even though they are being very as personal as you think that they are being with the camera and with their audience, there's still so many aspects of their life and who they are that they aren't sharing. And
in real life too, you don't know anybody. Even when you're dating somebody, you don't know them until you live with them.
Right. Well, but the thing about like daily vloggers, for example.
Yeah.
Is you're seeing them day in and day out, and they'll even vlog in the bathroom. They'll even vlog, while they're making, when they first wake up, they'll vlog with their shirts off, and like we've seen like Casey take a shower.
Yeah.
It's just like, and this is stuff that makes it feel like it's personal. It makes it feel like we're a part of their everyday life, but we really aren't. And I think that it takes a lot of to kind of to think about that. For a lot of people, I feel like it's a challenge. Like they don't actually understand that there is this difference between what we're seeing.
500% smarter and even more thoughtful than the person that you're consuming for fun and that you think is fun and goofy, which he is, like on camera. And yet in real life, he's 500 times smarter, more educated, more thoughtful, and more nuanced than what you see.
Right.
And I don't think he's dumbing it down. I think he's come to the conclusion that this is what you want from me, so this is what I give you, and this is the relationship we have, and this is the part of me that's the most interesting or entertaining to you, so I am accommodating you. It's kind of like how you may not love the same hobby or something as your significant other, but you won't act exasperated. You're not faking or really lying to them, but you're being supportive and you're not bringing them down while they're enjoying their thing. It's the same thing. It's not 100% honest, but it's not a lie. And it's not totally contrived. It's a kindness in a way, and it's part of the social contract that exists.
Yeah. Now I'm going to flip this question because we're kind of we've been on the same side this whole time.
No.
What is it like? Have you had anybody say that you are their role model? Because I've had people tell me that.
It makes me uncomfortable because I am so much of a work in progress, which I talk about with my therapist. Like, I'm so much in a work in progress that's like, what I tell people is like, my methodologies, yeah, but like, you don't even know me, and you don't like, you realize how I've made,
especially you, like, you don't share like anything.
Yeah. So that's why I'm like, what do you think you're building up in your mind? Like, again, and it's something they built up in their mind. It's something that they created in their head. It's like, yeah, that vision you came up with for me, where you filled in the blanks of things you believe, or you realize how many people tell me that I'm their role model, but they don't even know that I'm Panamanian, and they don't know that I'm a first generation American.
Right.
Like, so, but how are you going to sit there and lift me up on a pedestal, call me your role model, think about my lifestyle? You don't even know my culture.
Right.
You're filling in the blanks in this fantasy that you've created about me. You can't tell me one thing about my childhood. You can't name my dogs. You don't know how many siblings I have. Like, even though I've said that stuff in videos, you can't remember that. You don't know anything about me, but I'm your role model. You built up this idea of what the time, like, you can't fill in the timeline of my life before age 28 or something like that. And yet you think that you want to be me or be like me. When what honest would be to say that you want the outcomes and results that I have. And I share enough of that for people to build something off of. That's called a framework. But like, you can't sit there and think that I'm a good role model when you don't know anything about me.
Yeah. How about you, Audrey? Have you had anything like that yet? I say yet because I know it will happen if it hasn't yet.
I mean, I've had a couple people in DMs say stuff like that, and normally it's like in reference to like YouTube or filmmaking or something. And it's weird because I feel like they're nitpicking things. Again, kind of like what Roberto said, like they don't know the full story. So when they say like, for example, like they like what I'm doing on YouTube, they like want to do the same thing. Like, okay, that's more specific than, role model in general. So I feel like if someone calls you a role model, it's kind of awkward because it's like that's a lot of pressure, and they don't know the full story most of the time.
Right. Yeah.
And like, where are you going to be a year from now? You don't know who you're going to be a year from now. So why are you grafting? They're also grafting an expectation that you are going to forever be the way that you are. Like, I mean, somebody that I'm cool with in the community, H3, Ethan from H3. Like, he gets a lot of crap from people because they were young teenagers who grew up when he was doing edgy content and when he was a small channel punching up at, people much bigger. And they didn't realize that he couldn't do that indefinitely. He couldn't stay that person indefinitely. And that, yes, to some extent, a change in lifestyle, not living in a crappy apartment, marrying your wife and like your best friend, working with them, building another business, doing these things, and also growing up and becoming over a certain age. Yeah, he's not going to be the person that you liked and you fell in love with and you grew up with when he was that. And it's like, he didn't fall off. He didn't change or sell out or do anything. It's called he grew the F up. And you maybe didn't, because there's a drastic gap a lot of times between the age of a content creator and their audience. Right. And that has consequences because, like I said, with the Pauls, I think they're victims of success because they're egged on by people like 10 years younger than them that don't know what consequences look like. So I'm like, that's one thing. And then I think when you have fans there like that, they don't accept when you move on. Think about all the people still longing for the good old days of Filthy Frank. He hated that character. He wasn't even invested in that. He was making fun of people who would like that thing, but he was grateful to people who made him rich and famous. And then when he moved on to become JoJo and do his music thing, and he killed off Filthy Frank, he was like, I understand if you guys can't move along with me or support me, that's fine. I think he was really mature about it. I think he was a sweetheart about it, and people like and love that about him. I think in some ways it was overly generous because that stuff still haunts his new career because he's trying to be grateful to people who like a version of him that literally was a made-up character, is not anything about who he is and his values, is the opposite of his values. And actually to this day, negatively impacts his career, but he doesn't want to completely disavow and destroy that thing and scrub it from history because he's grateful to the people who put him on, which I understand, and that's fair, and those are valid feelings. But it comes at this personal cost and toll, and you have people that literally all this time later, years later, can't let it go and are still emotionally invested in the fictional contrived character he made to make fun of people who like that.
You know who kind of went through that? I mean, not in that same degree, but Justine. Justine, she, when she first started, her videos were a very different tone. And as a result, she had a very young audience. And eventually, as YouTube grew, and she was also growing, but her views were dwindling because she was still creating the same kind of content, but her audience was growing up and they were losing interest in the kinds of things that she was doing. And she was no longer that kind of role model.
So she pivoted, unlike Louis Singh.
And exactly. And so she pivoted and is now making content for an older audience.
Crushing it.
Right. She's doing a really, really great job. And amazing how she's been able to do it all with the same channel that she created over 10 years ago. And that's really impressive and not something that a lot of people have been able to do. I have friends who are OG YouTube creators and were popping years ago and are now essentially dead. I mean,
I know
you get more views than they do, Roberto, and they have twice as much.
I can think of people actually.
So many. And it's mainly because, I mean, one, they just didn't pivot to learn, for the audience that they already had. And so because of that, they had nothing. They had to build a new audience.
Yeah.
Because if you have, 15-year-olds, they're not who are watching you. They're not going to be 25-year-olds watching the same thing they were watching when they were 15. And you're making the same thing. You got to go out and look for new 15-year-olds to watch your videos if you're still going to be making the same videos.
Yeah, I agree. And even I am looking at that pivot and looking at, like, there's a new conversation that I want to have that allows me to build a new audience. And there's a lot of things I want to get back to. Like, I think that with my main, and even with separate channels too, but even with my main channel, the evolution of this is I'm in some ways going back to my roots, but I'm addressing it in the current now because we somehow have dovetailed kind of back to where I started, where like the economy was in turmoil. Like, remember, like I came from, okay, the economy's in turmoil. I went from like being employed to then being a freelancer, self-employed, and then building a business and everything like that. And we're right back in the world, kind of in another version of the world that I started in. And I'm like, I need to go back to my roots of like teaching people skills with tutorials, talking about career options for people. With this new creator economy, the freelancing thing can dovetail into, well, maybe who you work for is like someone who's already a successful content creator, because maybe you can do graphics or editing or stuff for them. And there are people who do that for me. So I can talk about how people get hired by me, or people like me, or friends. I refer people, you refer people, like stuff like, so you see what I'm saying? I can see that being an evolution and a way to do that. And even I'm looking at that. But to a point that someone brought up in the chat, because, and let me pull it for you. Somebody brought up, for example, I think it was Luke. Luca Balab. So not knowing or knowing somebody's life story and background does change perception, because, primary example, I don't match up philosophically to a lot of things that most people in America do, because I'm first generation. So I have an immigrant mentality about things. That's a difference in the way that, so when someone doesn't like think about that, something I say or do seems very off or odd or oddball to them, whether they agree or disagree with it, but it would change their way of taking it maybe with a grain of salt if they reconsidered the fact that it's like, oh, wait a minute, that's right. He has a different cultural background that might be informing his experiences. Because when you don't consider something about the source of your information or contextualize the person you're looking at, another example is, primary example, when like people don't remember that I'm 36 years old, it changes the context of what I say. When they think that I'm 26 years old or 22 years old, it changes the context and even the level of seriousness or authority or certainty behind what I say. So that's like, details do matter. Details do matter. And the more you know about something, it's also easier to empathize with people, and also sometimes to give slack or be more forgiving of something. I can, in fact, still cut a Jake or Logan Paul some slack because of their age at this point. Like, but their shenanigans would be unforgivable over 30. Like,
right. Yeah.
Because I'd be like, I would have expected more growth by now. There are influencers and people that are in their 30s or even their 40s to where I'm like, how the hell are you still like this? Did your emotional intelligence stunt at like so early on, and things of that nature? Or I can be more impressed with a young person like I am with Audrey, like of like, wow, you carry yourself extraordinarily well compared to a lot of your other contemporaries or something. Or when I remember that Mr. Beast and Jake Paul are pretty much the same age. When I remember that, and I'm like, okay, wait, Mr. Beast, Jake, and Tana are pretty much the same age. You're like, there's a year difference. Like, right. And look at the world of difference in their mentality.
Yeah, you can't play. Yeah, you can't blame the. Yeah, it is. Audrey's my role model.
No.
If I had a role model, Marquez is 10 years younger than me.
Is that what you're gonna say, Audrey? You're just gonna, I come over here and you're all just like, no.
If I was not called, like, there are two people, there are three people. There are three people that I could look at and say to me, but I also have context on these people, and I actually have met like them with the exception of one, because I haven't met Linus, but like Linus is a role model to me. And
does he have a blanket?
Maybe. Linus, Marquez, and Justine are role models to me. Like,
yeah, I think it's Tim Ferriss is a role model for me. But I do not know anything really about his personal life. Right? Have I what?
You've met Tim once, right?
No.
Oh. Would you say, well, with him, would you say that he's a hero instead of a role model? Because there might be, like, we could argue a difference between having a role model and having a hero.
No, I don't say hero. I never
Yeah, I don't think I've ever heard someone say, "So-and-so is my hero."
Yeah, I don't say that. I mean, if you saved my life, then I'll say that.
Yeah, if you physically saved my life.
My mom's a hero to me. Pat Flynn's a hero.
Well, she gave you life, so that's close enough to save.
Well, my mom's a hero to me, and she's probably the closest thing I've ever had to a mentor. My mentor taught me everything about the Force, including the nature of the dark side. Anyway,
I thought your mentor was like Darth Vader or something.
He is.
No, it's Palpatine.
Hero.
It's Palpatine. Nobody's role model is Darth Vader. Audrey.
Palpatine and Vader.
Roberto.
Like that.
Nobody.
Palpatine's been an excellent mentor from afar.
I'm sorry. I don't know.
Yeah. Palpatine's great. Darth Vader, on the other hand, he's too emotional. There's too much going on. He's irrational.
What he's overcome, what Vader has overcome, is really
no. That's not an excuse.
What Vader? No, I'm saying he's an inspiration. He's an inspiration. I mean,
all right, he can be an inspiration, but he still is too emotional, and he bases all of his actions are reactionary. There's no real strategy to his work.
I beg to differ. We'll have an argument for another time. But here's why Pat Flynn and Gary Vee are heroes to me. Gary Vee, who I've had the pleasure of having multiple conversations with, and having met him and D-Rock and a lot of the team, like over the years. And I'm not someone who like read Crush It in 2009 either. I was like on my journey and whatnot when I met Gary and found out about him. But Gary became a hero to me because it validated the fact that I'm not insane, because when I was in corporate America, all of my ideas about how business works, how the internet works, how the beginnings of fledgling social media work were invalidated by my peers, my superiors, and it ultimately is what culminated in me leaving my career and leaving my job. And Gary Vee, someone who was 9 years older, was on the same wavelength, saying the same things, proving those results, and being respected. He was also somebody who was being unapologetically himself and didn't have to wear a mask. And as someone who had left corporate America and was finding my footing, that was validating.
I thought we all had to wear masks now.
Fair point. Wear a damn mask. Anyway, with Gary, not having to have the corporate facade, and not having to be contrived, and not having to be a yes man. That was the fact that he was so unapologetically raw was very refreshing, and it was very validating to say that this is not some insane risk or gamble, or I'm not insane just because other people don't get it. I'm ahead of the curve, and here's someone who's shown that what I do and what I want to do and who I am is something that can succeed. So that was very important to me. With Pat, he was someone closer in age to me and closer in temperament to me than Gary. And to see like what he did and the kind that were the same kind of nerdy, introverted type personality and like the same things, and to see what he was doing was also something that was very empowering to me, and to also hear his story, and that, we left the corporate world in similar circumstances, and look at everything he's achieved. And more importantly to me, he was able to do it and build a family. And he has a very different family philosophy than Gary. And I was like, and that's why people don't realize that, like, they think Gary Vee is my favorite entrepreneur. Again, another way they don't know, Pat Flynn is my favorite entrepreneur. And he's also...
I thought Palpatine was your favorite entrepreneur.
No, Palpatine is my first favorite political figure.
Oh... All right. Before we start wrapping up, there's a question. There's a question that I want us to get to before we start wrapping up, which is from Andy, the Andy Sand. Can people be role models for what not to do?
I feel like we've established the answer is yes.
Sometimes starting with your own parents.
All right, guys. So does that mean we're going to start wrapping up? Oh, look at that.
Oh my god, same.
Wow.
It was amazing.
You guys.
He changed though in the second one.
Look, this one has been a good one. This one has been a good episode.
Look, on a
Thank you, Diaz.
I don't think there's anything wrong with looking at somebody who has maybe you admire or look up to somebody or aspire to have like the lifestyle they have, and you've thought in your head that you'd have to be like them. But in a way, you don't have to be like them so much as you might have to do things that they have done. But you also can maybe achieve those same things without doing things that they've done. You just have to actually figure out what it is that and be honest with. People are not honest with themselves about what they like. The young man that you and I talked to at DragonCon, Romina, again, when we got to be honest, it's that basically he wanted to have a good life, not have to work a regular job like he sees his parents do, and he wanted to be able to have money and friends and travel. And he felt like, well, the way I see people do that, or the way I relate to that, is people become YouTubers and they get to do that. But that's also because he hadn't lived long enough, and he hadn't been given any other examples of how that can be achieved without fame. And you and I gave some examples of how that might be achieved without fame. And you can even look to our example, like in that regard. You don't have to be us, but there are things you can do that we've done that let us do the things or more things than some of those famous people have done. Like I said, you've traveled to more places and more countries than the Paul brothers have, than most influencers have. Without needing to be a millionaire. Like, you don't have to be people talk about aspiring to travel, doing all these things. You don't have to be a millionaire to do that. To be honest, looking at a lot of the what I call the modest millionaires, people who live the millionaire next door lifestyle, maybe Graham Stephan or whatever. I don't even have a tenth of their net worth. Not even a tenth. I don't think. No, maybe more than a tenth. I'd have to look, maybe a tenth of the income or something like that, but not a tenth of the net worth. And yet I have a comparable lifestyle in many aspects because we're being frugal and we're living in a similar vein, and you can do that. The thing is, if you really analyze things, weirdly, my old boss is a multimillionaire, and I thought about it, and I was like, my lifestyle is comparable to his, and he didn't get that lifestyle until he was 10 years older than I am now. And I didn't do the same things he did. I didn't step on people. I didn't have to even build a business as big as the business he built to do all of that. So you can find your own path. You can sometimes use what other people have done to figure things out along the way. But probably the most important thing is, instead of trying to look to a role model or even a hero, you need to probably learn more about yourself and look to yourself and find answers within yourself for what you really, really want. Because I think that people say, oh, well, what that person have, that looks nice, because you don't know what you want. So you're just replacing that with what these other people have.
That's deep. I feel like that was a good thing to wrap up on. That was a good ending.
Yeah, that's a nice little bow. That's a nice little bow you tied there, Boo. I'm not gonna undo it. So if you have an outro, we can just continue this discussion offline.
To banter a little bit. I need 2 minutes to come around.
Mina, I didn't tell you guys who my role model is.
It's Logan Paul.
Moto. Oh. No.
It's Lightning McQueen.
Connor Franta. Oh. No. Well, yeah, but
I feel like you told us that.
I definitely have. And
it still is.
Yeah.
It's still Connor.
But I think it's not I want to be him. It's just I appreciate what he's done.
You admire his work.
Yeah. And I've never been disappointed by him either. I've seen some of my friends, especially recently, I had a friend who was really upset by some YouTuber that she used to watch a lot, who was starting to get canceled for a good reason. And I've Connor hasn't disappointed me yet, so I don't know.
That's good. It always sucks when you get disappointed by a role model.
But I also don't base my entire I just appreciate what he's done, and I appreciate that he's a good person, seemingly, at least online. So
that's also subjective, though.
That's true.
what a good person is subjective. And I also think that even like what bothers me about this whole people getting canceled over stuff is like there's no, I mean, literally, and sometimes even then, but literally, like it would, like if it's not like literally taking a life or some really truly unforgivable, like people don't get canceled over doing horrible, egregious, unforgivable-ish.
Is this part of your outro, Roberto? We're just stalling over here, waiting for you.
Look, Roberto. People, like, almost nobody gets canceled. They don't like.
I'm about to cancel you.
Nobody gets canceled. Did anything that would merit having a criminal record? So why the hell are people? Why do people give a damn? And why do people?
I think it's more like
say that they're a bad person.
I just think it's more like disappointment. You know.
So what? Like your parents disappointed you.
I know, but they're just, you hold them to higher standards because you don't actually know them.
Why?
I know it's messed up. I agree.
Why? Like it's I know, like I've forgiven friends who have legit stolen from me. Like, and
maybe because it's more disposable.
And people are literally canceling people because they don't like the way they broke up with their girlfriend.
That's true. Maybe because it's just people online. It's like, it's just kind of easy to be like, you did that, I'm not going to follow you anymore.
And they were stupid to begin with.
Yeah. No.
Christ. Ooh. Like, for real.
So what chef suggested our next topic? Does cancel culture impact free speech?
No, I don't want to touch that one. I don't want to touch that one because
I feel like it's 39.5 for poll.
I don't want to touch that one because I'm going to leave it at this. Like here's the problem with that argument right there, and then
Roberto, we're supposed to be wrapping up. Do you have an outro already? We've been stalling for 10 minutes.
Comment. Stop. Stop saying.
Someone like the chat. Come up with a nickname for Romina because that's the only reason I can't figure out an outro. So chat, come up with a nickname for Romina for me real quick. But make it holiday themed. Make it holiday themed. Here's my problem with the idea of even bringing up free speech, cancel culture, and the internet, because the problem with what most free speech absolutionists want when they complain to these platforms about these platforms censoring is that they're asking for communism without realizing it. Because what you're asking is, let's go get the government to then, at the barrel of a gun, force a private entity and private people to give up their private property in the form of their resources, their server hosting, and also compel their labor in the form of customer service and support and all these things in engineering. Let's go ahead and compel people's labor, seize their resources, tell them they have to give them to us on our terms, and we're not even paying them for it, and we're going to force the government to do that on our behalf. That's called communism. Go get the government, go get Big Brother to go take other people's shit, their server, their hosting. Go get the government to compel their labor to do what I want, or else. That is called communism. So you can't sit there and say, I want to go and enact communism in the name of free speech. It doesn't work for me. So it's a losing argument. And no, you won't change my mind. So
Connor says he just joined the chat and thought that the show was already over, but he's been in here for 10 plus minutes.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's my rant on that's my rant on why.
And if you guys enjoy this rant, then please subscribe and give us a thumbs up.
Yeah. Oh, Juana first says they tried to cancel Quackity, who's a Mexican content creator, for speaking Spanish. See, yeah, people are stupid. Like that's I can't. Like there's and the thing is,
Roberto, why is this still happening?
Like, hang on. It's like what? Like, I mean, I've been removed to.
I've been hanging on for 10 minutes.
Stupidity a crime before I worry about the other stuff. Like, I'm like, I'd rather just make stupidity a crime. Let's do that. Like, I'm for that. Let's make stupidity a crime. Let's write that into legislation. Like, also, let's write treason by incompetence into legislation. That'll solve all of our problems, to be honest with you. Like, that'll do it. That'll fix everything. Like, just that one thing, just like treason by incompetence is now the mandate of law. Like, that's perfect. It just fixes everything right then and there. But yeah, I think I'm ready for our outro.
Waiting on you, Roberto.
Roberto, Romina, do you like the new band?
Why is this happening?
Thank you for listening to the No Assembly Required podcast, a podcast where we talk about nothing and where Roberto fixes the entire government because it's not that difficult. Thank you so much for listening. No audience members were harmed in the filming of today's podcast, only the feelings of my two esteemed co-hosts. Speaking of which, you will definitely want to tune in next week as we continue the conversation. And please leave us a review in Apple Podcast. Unfortunately, you cannot leave us a review in Spotify because they aren't doing their damn job. In the meantime, they're just trying to go and get the next Joe Rogan on their platform. Anyway, this has been your trio of hosts, starting with Rudolph the Red-Nosed Romina, Audrey Ember, and of course, your favorite Dark Lord of the Internet, Roberto Blake. Thank you for listening. Nah.